15th of March 2019. An Australian man, 28 years of age and a self-proclaimed white nationalist, live streams himself as he storms into two mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. Within the span of an hour, he shoots and kills 50 people and leaves many more severely injured. As the world stood by watching in horror as the attack unfolded, we all asked the same question. How did we let things get to this? The killer was an Australian man, and Australia needs to have this discussion. Christchurch does not exist in a vacuum. It comes after decades of society letting paranoia and fear dominate the discussion around refugees and immigrants. After decades of cheap point scoring by right-wing politicians, and decades of sensationalist media stoking the flames of fear with the message that immigrants and refugees are security threats. As early as 1996, One Nation leader Pauline Hanson drummed up fears that Australia was being,
I believe we are in danger of being swamped by Asians.
In 2001, former Prime Minister John Howard stirred heated political debate about the Tampa affair, pushing stricter measures for border security. Slowly but surely, this divisive rhetoric has built up to the point where refugees and asylum seekers are now intertwined with any national security discussion. What is tragic about the national conversation at large is that it fails to see the impact it has on real human lives. Falsely depicting migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers as security threats eventually leads to tragedies like Christchurch, but also more long-lasting forms of abuse. Australia's detention policies, both onshore and offshore, have been a tremendous cause of suffering for these groups, with high rates of suicide, increased mental health-related problems, and horrific human rights abuses. The detention centres on Manus and Nauru have faced scrutiny around the world, with the United Nations and several NGOs calling for an end to this detention, and warning that Australia may well be guilty of crimes against humanity. Australians must make no mistake. Real human lives are being impacted by speaking about refugees and asylum seekers as security threats. The media has had a particularly powerful role to play in constructing this social panic. Front-page newspaper headlines and blatantly racist cartoons from mainstream media outlets like the Daily Telegraph and Sun Herald indicate the lowly position of the existing public discourse. We've seen racist cartoons showing refugees as a nuisance. We've seen divisive headlines describing immigrants as comprising a foreign invasion. We've seen ethnic minorities being described as potential criminals. Politicians have similarly played their hand in marginalising these already disenfranchised groups. Conservative far-right politicians such as Pauline Hanson have frequently cited blatantly Islamophobic and anti-immigrant sentiments, having said,
Islam is a disease. We need to vaccinate ourselves against that.
But the far right isn't the only cause of divisive rhetoric. Several mainstream politicians, including our Prime Minister Scott Morrison and his role in Operation Sovereign Borders, have been responsible for creating a culture of fear around immigration and asylum seekers. The conversation as of yet has been filled with misrepresentations and an appalling lack of evidence. Most refugees and asylum seekers are found to be genuine and deserve to be resettled to a different country. They flee difficult circumstances, often created by the very countries they are fleeing to, only to be demonized further once they arrive. Whilst there is no proven link between immigration and crime, we can say for sure that refugees and asylum seekers go on to be important contributors to Australia's cultural and economic growth as a nation. The national conversation must change and realise that although crime and terrorism are serious concerns, refugees and migrants are not the ones to blame.